All right, welcome everyone to the latest Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign webinar. This is actually webinar number 47 during year 4, well, 47 during the 4 years. We are currently in year 4. This is the 47th webinar. We've actually had several other webinars. We have had about 8 special webinars with different groups like the European Phenology Campaign, Globe Africa, and Globe Asian Pacific region, so lots of other ones as well. But today we have some absolutely amazing presenters, and they're going to be talking about from treetops to coastal waters, mapping coastal wetlands in 3 dimensions with NASA data. That was with Dr. Lola Fatoyimbo, and we have a look at mangrove work with the Green Heritage Fund Suriname. Okay, so that is with some folks. We have Monique here with us and Genevieve, and we will have their presentations in a little bit. But I want to go over a couple things here first that, we usually don't do like really current non-campaign related news, but lots of things going on right now. First thing I want to show you here is you may have heard in the United States, and this is not too far north from where Peter Falcon is coming from, the Yosemite wildfire is happening right now. And we've talked about Yosemite often. We've talked about the giant sequoias. My family and I were there last year, and we did some tree height observations of trees. We did the general, what did we do? The general Sherman tree, and we got some great results with that. And what I want to show you is it's a news story just for you, brings up to date, because maybe a lot of you who are in other parts of the world other than the United States may not have seen some of the the issues going on with Yosemite and Sequoia National Park. So this should take me to a YouTube video. So I'm going to then bounce back to the presentation at that. But I want you to see this video. It's from NBC News. And I just wanted you to bring people apprised of this, because we've talked about a lot of this we've had some presentations from researchers on, trees and wildfires and land cover and things like that. But this is one that's, we see more with our changing climate. We see things like this happening more frequently. Last year there was one in Yosemite threatening the sequoias as well. So even though sequoias are naturally resistant to fire, they're not completely resistant. Okay, so they have to have a lot of mitigation factors involved here to try to save these and keep the fire from spreading. So let me go ahead and share this video here.
Physics tells us that in order to stay in orbit, an object must...
There we go.
Tonight, the urgent battle to save one of Yosemite's most valued treasures is heating up. The Mariposa Grove, home to the largest collection of giant sequoias in the park, some standing here for thousands of years, now under threat from an out-of-control inferno that's been tearing through drought-stricken brush since Thursday.
It's some of the oldest trees that there are. They're massive giants when you stand next to them. And
crews are fighting the fire from the air and ground. The Washburn fire has already ripped across more than 700 acres. Parts of the park now closed during one of its busiest times. The summer months here typically attract more than 1 million visitors. The flames have forced an estimated 1,600 people to evacuate from a nearby community and popular campground. Tonight, fears more evacuations may be on the way.
Everybody's been training and preparing for this, and that's what everyone is here to do, fight that fire.
Over the Washburn incident, Yosemite National Park, Mariposa County.
All of Yosemite is under what the California Drought Monitor calls extreme or exceptional drought. With almost no rainfall in recent months, conditions are primed for fires to burn hotter and for longer periods of time. We're now here inside the Mariposa Grove, and as you can see, the fire has already burned through this section of the grove, but it's still very much active in other parts. And so much of the success that firefighters may have in the coming days is going to depend on the conditions.
All right.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top story.
All right. I wanted to showcase that because, that's tragic going on there right now. But, with the foresters out there and the wildlife management groups and the wildfire, wildlife groups, they're really working to really get this fixed. Did a great job last year and other times when this area was threatened. So, keep your fingers crossed and keep everyone there in your thoughts. Now, on to nicer news. Okay. you may have seen yesterday, they released the first image from the James Webb Space Telescope, basically the most technologically advanced telescope ever looking at the origins of our universe. And I took this little quote here from astrophysicist, you've probably heard him, Neil deGrasse Tyson. It sums it up very well. The deepest view ever obtained in the universe, filled with galaxies. The several spiked objects are local stars in our own Milky Way. Ignore them. Everything else is an entire galaxy unto itself. Notice that many distort into arcs. You can see that often in this image. These are distant galaxies that reveal the curvature of space-time caused by the gravity of a cluster of galaxy in image center. So what's amazing about this, it's kind of unfathomable to be able to wrap your brain around what you're seeing here. Just this image is just absolutely amazing. We're seeing further back than we've ever seen before in the history of our universe. And if you want to learn more, I popped a bit.ly link down here because the actual link to the NASA news article is very long. So here is a bit, and I'll have this on the website as well when we post the recording of the video of the webinar. But I wanted to showcase this, and right now, for the next like probably 40 minutes, they're going to be releasing new images like every 15, 20 minutes as they come in. So, you know, there's a NASA live going on right now on YouTube, streaming, you know, in different places, Twitter, all these different places, Facebook. But stay with us here, please, because you can watch that afterwards. But yeah, you know, please feel free to take this because some of the images that are coming out are absolutely amazing. And this one, it's just mind blowing. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris were here talking about this yesterday. They unveiled it with Senator Bill Nelson, our NASA administrator. So this is amazing stuff. So, you know, get everyone excited about space exploration because this is just the next amazing step in, you know, understanding our universe. So, all right, to today's webinar agenda. You know, latest news we cover, we're going to do the quick warm-up activity like we always do, kind of get people, you know, in the mood about trees and land cover, things like that. A little bit about campaign metrics, and then I will show part 2 of the video with the Globe Latin American Caribbean Regional Coordination Office's coordinator, Mariana Savino. And then we will jump right into our feature presentations, first with Dr. Lola Fatoyimbo, and then with Genevieve Soto-Wingolo and Monique Poole from the Green Heritage Fund Suriname. So, and then we will have our own Peter Nelson take a closer look. He'll be joining us a little later. He's actually in another webinar right now. He'll be talking about some of the things that he's looked at using online tools and looking at mangroves and land cover. And then we will have Peter Falcon. He's going to finish up talking a little bit about the potential World Tree Day on August 8th to get out and take, you know, observations, and this is in, you know, in collaboration with Globe India, and Desh is here as well. So Peter's going to just mention this a little bit towards the end. Then we'll have some wrap-up discussion. So here we go. Here we have the regional warm-up, and what you're looking at here, and those of you who have been on the webinar before, you're going to take a look at both of these images, and you're going to determine several things. One is take a look at both pictures. What type of land cover and trees do you see? Or basically, what do you see here? What can you identify in these photographs? Okay, and then I want you to put in the chat. You can add this all in the chat, but also put in the chat which one of these do you think is most likely found in the Latin America and Caribbean region? We have two. We have Aniba roseadora and Sorbus groenlandica. That should give you a little hint if you know a little Latin there. So, you know, take a look at these two sources of trees and vegetation, and then put in the chat which one you think is most likely to be in the Latin America and Caribbean region. And we'll take about 2-3 minutes to do that because we have a lot of stuff going on here today. So feel free to put that in the chat. And Peter, if you can, if anything pops up in the chat, you know, go ahead and read some stuff off.
Will do. We do have a first person. Monique Poole says the Annabelle rosadora, she thinks is in the Latin community, Latin area, I should say. We got, once again, the same thing, Annabelle. And then we have Genevieve, same thing. Everyone seems to be thinking that the Annabelle Rosadora.
I think everybody
Uh,
knows Latin.
There's a little bit of Latin, yes, some Spanish. Marilyn, once again, she feels the Annabelles from Latin America. This may be the first time we have 100% consensus.
And there's one little caveat that I'm gonna show here about these two, especially about the one on the right. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of that before, but but we'll give it about half a minute yet for people to, if anybody else wants to add anything in the chat.
Beautiful color, by the way.
Oh yeah. It's a nice color because we get a lot of in Maryland, we get crepe myrtle trees that are often this color. I actually saw one, it was in a median in the highway yesterday. There were actually two of them exactly this color. So, well, I shouldn't say like exactly, it's never exactly the color, but very close to this pink. So yeah, beautiful. It's great for beauty, but bad for my allergies.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on. So, it seems like there's a unanimous decision that the Aniba rosadora is the one chosen for best representing the Latin American Caribbean region. Okay, that's true. It's a species that, sorry, it's a little fuzzy here, the picture. Species of magnolid tree in the family Laraceae. It is often mislabeled as a rosewood tree because rosewood is really popular in the, I've seen a lot of rosewood in like the carving industry and people who do carving hobbies and things like that. But it's often mistaken as that. It grows in parts of the tropical rainforest of South America. It is an endangered species, though, because it sees exploitation for its essential oils. So great job, everyone, on that. But then the other one is the Greenland mountain ash, the Sorbus groenlandica. It's actually a shrub. It can look like a tree to many, but it's actually a shrub. Okay, and it cannot be found north of 15 degrees north, and then which confines it to the southern tip of Greenland. It's generally deeper up the western fjords, such as Pacific valleys. It can also be found in eastern Canada and New Hampshire and Maine. Okay, and as you know, the Groenlandica, that's the Latin for Greenland. So a lot of you didn't fall for that, so that's great. But yeah, I wanted to showcase this because this is one that's often misconstrued as trees, but it actually is considered a shrub, technically. So just want to showcase that. All right. So now here we have, these campaign metrics that I show every time we have the webinar, and we're getting a lot. And, thanks to Peter Nelson and a lot of the programs that he's running, that he's doing, working with students directly, a lot of university students, the numbers for land cover have really jumped up recently. So that's great. We've had literally thousands of land cover observations over the last couple months. So, all the way at the bottom, what you see here is we are over 53,700 tree height measurements since the campaign began on September 15, 2018, which, as you know, coincided with the launch of the ICESat-2 satellite. We have, that's coming from over 20,000 global sites. We have 28,614 land cover measurements. And just last month, I believe, that was only at about 25,000. So we've had a lot. Huge increase in those land cover measurements. And then we have over 31,000 green up, green down measurements. And like I say all the time, this is primarily a thank you to our GLOBE, the European Phenology Campaign, and the folks in the Europe and Eurasia region. They just do such an amazing job. Lenka, Bara, and Donna do such an amazing job getting the folks there to take the green up and green down observations with their fall and spring campaigns. So thank you for that. So we have lots of great measurements coming in from all over. And as you know, we do this because we want professional researchers and student researchers to have this data and to be able to look at that change over time, because at NASA, kind of that sweet spot for looking at change over time, as the minimum is like 5 years. We look at it way further back than 5 years, but once you have like 4 or 5 years of data, specifically 5 years, you can really see some changes and evidence of the changing of the variables, seeing how trees are growing, how land cover's changing, and things like that. And also we do that with our satellite observations. The Landsat mission really looks at change over time, and not too long from now, about 11 days from now, we'll be celebrating Landsat's 50th anniversary in space, So we're super excited about that. July 23rd, 1972 is when we started. So we have lots of awesome stuff on the way. And, we have that upcoming land cover challenge that's going to begin, very soon around that time. So, stay tuned for that and check out the Globe website. There's lots of stuff on the Globe website about it where you can sign up, and we actually have the awesome Go C3, and I'll put that link in the chat later on. It's the Go C3 where we talk to citizens. We have citizen scientists who are going to be there presenting. It's all celebrating, the Globe citizen science volunteers, who have taken observations. And we've actually had some folks there. We've had some folks who have taken 9,000 to 10,000 NASA Globe Observer cloud observations. So we have a presentation from that gentleman. I believe he is from India, and he has been taking so many observations with a Globe Observer. But we're going to celebrate all those volunteers who've been taking those citizen science observations with the Globe Observer, and that is July 26th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And you can check that out. You can go to the news section on the Globe website and learn all about that. It is right there. You might have to scroll down a little bit, but it's all right there. But I'll put that link in the chat later on. So this is where all the observations are coming from. We have participants in the campaign from 60 countries. We have a great amount of webinars. And then we have the blogs always available. We have 58 blogs with over 150,000 views. So I also want to share before I go into the interview that we had a publication just published in the Environmental Research Letters. It's a special issue on public participation in environmental research. And the paper is the potential of citizen science data to complement satellite and airborne LiDAR tree height measurements, lessons from the GLOBE program. And as you can see, we have lots of awesome stuff in here. We have comparisons between the ICET-2 tree height data and the GLOBE ground-based citizen science data. We did comparisons in a study site in Grand Mesa, Colorado. Our lead author, Josh Enterkine, out of Boise State, and then Dr. Nancy Glenn out of Boise State. They did some field work in Grand Mesa, so we did a combination of looking at their airborne data over Grand Mesa, the ICET-2 data from space, and also the ground-based data from NASA Global Observer. And then we had a bunch of observations in Greenbelt, Maryland, where Goddard Space Flight Center is located, where Lola is located. We did some awesome observations here, and we talk in this paper basically about how we came up with the app, how we figured out the math on the app and how we got it to work, and all these different variables in doing comparisons between the datas, the space-based data and the ground-based data, with some airborne thrown in there as well. So take a look at that. There's a link at the bottom. I'll also put that in the chat for the paper. But we did also error and variability analysis in this paper, based upon the observers and how accurate the data is, with the estimation. So feel free to take a look at that at your leisure. But that was just published on June 21st. All right. Now let me do this, and then after this we will jump into our major presentations. And as you know, we saw the first part of this video last month at the, I believe it was June 14th webinar, and this is the second part with my interview with Mariana Savino. So enjoy. All right, well, let's shift for a second here. Talk a little bit about the IVSS. So as we all know, we get a lot of great IVSS projects from the Globe Latin American Caribbean region. So how important is it for students to submit to the Globe IVSS call for projects and research reports each year with the GLOBE program?
Well, first of all, I think it's crucial for students to learn how to develop a research project, how to pick up a scientific question, how to make a scientific methodology process to get to answer this question and to get to a conclusion. So I think the IVSS, it's really, really a great opportunity for students, not only to learn how to develop our research projects, but also to develop some other skills like leadership, like creative thinking, like solving problems. When you are researching, maybe you can expect some results that are not occurring when you're going forward with your research. So I'm a huge fan for the IVSS. It's been the second year that we organize a virtual science fair within the Latin American region to give all students the opportunity to showcase their research project that have been submitted to the IVSS, to share their experiences, to inspire other students to make and to submit their own projects. So the IVSS project it's a great opportunity. And regarding for researching about trees, I think it's also important, and it's the topic that we were mentioned before. They help them to understand their environment, to understand how the cities are changing the landscapes, how it affects for the human life, for the human health. And sometimes it happens that they can take the research for a higher level and make some community changes, because this year, for example, I give you an example. A group of Argentinian students have made a research project about the trees surrounding the school. And they have become like the tree guardians of the city. So it's really important, because it makes a change in their community, and everyone is taking care of those trees, and everyone is being aware of no one damaging those trees, or no one. So it's really important to have a real connection with the local issues, with the local topics, with your local environment. When you really take care of something, the whole dimension change. So I think it's really important for students to learn about trees.
That's great. I love the term tree warriors in your city. So that's wonderful. Also, and I'm super excited to hear about you did the additional in your region, science fair, where everybody could participate and showcase their projects that they submitted to the Globe IVSS program. So that's great to give that opportunity for the students to all come together and learn from each other exactly, what the other students are doing, around the region.
Yes, and I would like to highlight that since the IVSS accepts research projects in different languages, it has been a great opportunity for LAC students to present their own projects in their own language, that is Spanish, because some years ago it was not possible to submit your project in your own language. So many students did the research project, but they couldn't submit them for the IVSS, and they couldn't share it with other students within the region. So it's been a great decision to allow students to present projects in different languages.
Yes, I noticed that over the last several years that there's been an increase in IVSS projects because of that. I've noticed some, from Saudi Arabia that were in their native language, and and from Latin American, Caribbean region, and other countries as well. So that's great. It really makes it all inclusive for everyone. Yeah. Those who aren't naturally English speakers. I think that's great, because as you know, science knows no language. It's the science. Science is science. It's just it's a universal language, I guess I could say. It's just portraying that science or getting that science out to the public sometimes requires some modification. And this is, as you mentioned, this is a great thing, that the GLOBE program has done.
Yes, that's why I was mentioning it.
Yeah. Okay, just a couple more questions here. This is a little more, it's just kind of in line with the IVSS. If there are students out there who want to do research projects and they're in your, the LAC region, are there any specific locations that you know of that you could, just mention where they might be able to focus some of their efforts. For example, are there areas where trees are really flourishing, or areas, where trees may be in jeopardy?
Well, I think every area, it's a great area to be studied and to make data collection, because you can have your tree guardians in your school area. And if you go further and deeper, of course, we have the Amazon area as a huge problem of deforestation in LAC region. And of course, it would be really important to focus on that region, because it's the lung of the planet. So if we continue with deforestation and not making any deep decision of cutting this situation, it will affect the whole world. We are going to have many climate change problems, global warming, everything. I don't want to be pessimist, but it's a really important area that we should focus on.
Yeah, the Amazon region really serves as one of those areas where you can really see how trees and tree height and things like that are really indicators of climate change. Because as you mentioned, if we have continued deforestation in the Amazon region, that's going to really affect our climate. There's going to be less carbon dioxide pulled out of the atmosphere and stored by trees. A lot of things can happen, it can cycle off of that. So, that's great. That would be great if we could get more measurements from the Amazon rainforest region. And we know that we can't have lots of people going into the central part of the Amazon rainforest because it's very remote. And it might not be safe, but there are areas where that people can access and, take tree height measurements of, as many trees as possible. But such an important region, as you mentioned, to take observations.
Yes, well, deforestation is a huge problem within the whole Latin American region, because the agriculture grows and the trees are an obstacle for those business. So we need really to be aware of this problem and make efforts to change it.
Yes. All right. So one more question. So do you have anything else you'd like to mention to the Globe Latin American Caribbean region campaign participants?
Yes, I would like to invite all the Latin American students and all the Globe students to be part of these really important campaigns. I really believe that we can make changes implementing the Globe program. I think that when you get to understand the interconnections and the interactions within the Earth system, it's like lifting a veil, and you start to see things clearly. And when you see the reality that is happening with our planet, you can't behave as you used to do it before that. So I really trust in the importance of these campaigns, and it helps students to understand that what happens in another part of the world, in a remote part of the world, it could really have an impact in their lives, in their health, in their environment, in the loss of biodiversity. So I really would like to invite all people, all Globe community members, to join these campaigns, to discuss what is happening in their communities, and to get to understand that everything affects the whole world. Everything what happens in a local area could really make an impact in the whole world. So we really need to be aware of the wonder of nature and take care of it, and be grateful for having this great planet for living here. So yes.
That's perfect. And I got out of that specifically, we want to understand the connectedness of not just the observations in a local area, but how those observations in a local area can affect something thousands and thousands of miles away. if you're taking an observation of tree height or land cover in the Amazon rainforest, that will have an impact in a place like maybe, the Africa region or the, Europe and Eurasia region, because we're all connected. Our planet's connected, our oceans are connected, our atmosphere is connected. So everything's connected. It's all, one big puzzle where each one of these pieces are, all the countries, all the environments, all the, observations. So we bring all that together, we connect everything together, and that's what we're trying to do with the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign, is to connect people together to understand that their what's happening in their local environment has a global impact.
Yeah. I would like to thank you and all your team for this great 4 years. I think you have been done a great job, and you have raised the voice about this topic, and I think it's really important for the whole Globe community to be part of this campaign.
Yep. And here's hoping for a 5th year coming up. So
great.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. So great. Yeah. Excellent. I want to thank you, Mariana, for this great interview and discussing this with me, because this is all these, this, not just the campaign, but all the science and observations and everything involved with the campaign and the Globe program overall. It's just so important for us to understand how local environment observations affect the entire planet. So Thank you so much again for this. And, hopefully we'll all be in person again someday, and, and doing some training and some presentations and seeing each other, person to person. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you. See.
All right. So thank you. That was a little long on that end, but she had some, thank you to Mariana. She had some amazing things to say during that. And we want to thank her, again for that. So now we're going to head into our featured presentations, and we're going to start off with Dr. Lola Fatoyinbo, who is a research physical scientist in the Biospheric Sciences Lab at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. And she's going to be talking to you today. I should mention we're talking all about mangroves today, and wetlands and places like that, which are such a huge topic of discussion in the science world now. And they always should have been and should be. But Lola's going to talk to you about from treetops to coastal waters, mapping coastal wetlands in 3 dimensions with NASA data. I will stop sharing, Lola, and you can go ahead and share your screen.
Sounds good. Give me 1 second. All right, are you seeing the right screen?
Swap displays.
Yeah. Looking good now?
Not yet. There we go. Perfect.
Right. All right, here we go. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Lola Fatoyinbo, and as Brian mentioned, I'm a research scientist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. And today I'll be talking to you about my research, which has been focused on mapping mangroves and other coastal ecosystems. So my talk today is called From Treetops to Coastal Depths, Monitoring Blue Carbon Ecosystems in 3 Dimensions. So before I go into a lot of the details of my slides and of the research that I wanted to present today, I'll be talking a little bit about the background of the group that I sit in, which is the Biospheric Sciences group here in the NASA Earth Sciences Division at the Goddard Space Flight Center. So our center is located right outside of Washington, D.C., big research center with almost 500, I think, Earth sciences working on different aspects. And in my group, the focus is really on studying life on Earth. And in particular, we do a lot of work on vegetation and changes in vegetation. And really, we have main goals for our research, and some of the primary goals that we're working on is really to better understand the global carbon cycle, global carbon stocks and carbon dynamics, and climate change and how it's affecting our planet and our ecosystems. So we're really interested in studying changes in ecosystem structure and ecosystem dynamics. So how forests are changing, for example, how tall trees are, where the tallest trees are located, and what the carbon stocks are of forests. And also what the productivity is, so how much carbon is being taken up and also emitted back into the atmosphere as it changes. We also study biodiversity and ecosystem sustainability. And in general, some of the questions we're trying to answer is to better understand how the Earth's carbon cycle and ecosystems are changing and what the consequences are for the Earth's carbon budget, ecosystem sustainability, and biodiversity. So if you've been following GLOBE and NASA, you know that we have many Earth observing satellites and Earth observatories that are orbiting our planet. I really like to show the slide highlighting NASA's Earth fleet that is currently operating and also planned for the future up to next year. There are many, many satellites here and instruments that are on the International Space Station. Some that I work with very closely, for example, the Landsat satellites you see down here, and also JEDI, which I will be talking about a little bit later in my talk. So as I mentioned, the work that I'm talking about today is really focused on improved mapping and monitoring of blue carbon ecosystem and coastal wetlands. So what are blue carbon ecosystems? Here I'm showing three systems: mangroves on the left, seagrasses in the middle, and salt marshes on the right. And essentially what happens with these systems is that they all occupy the space that is between land and sea. They grow in the intertidal area, very dynamic areas. And essentially they're able to grow very quickly, and when they're going through photosynthesis, they absorb large amounts of carbon, which they are then able to store in the soil beneath them and also in the vegetation. So in mangroves in particular, you have a lot of carbon that is stored in the trunks and the branches, roots, and woody material of the trees. These systems are really important. They provide many ecosystem services. But they have become even more recognized because of the important role that they play when it comes to the fight against climate change. Because on the one hand, they're able to take up large amounts of carbon and store them in their soil. In fact, they store, a mangrove, for example, stores about 3 to 5 times more carbon than per unit area, so per hectare, for example, 3 to 5 more times the amount of carbon than a tropical rainforest, for example. So even though they only occupy a relatively limited space in the coastal zone of tropical and subtropical areas, the amount of carbon is disproportionate to the amount of space that they occupy. So this is for mangroves. Seagrasses are also found in almost all coasts worldwide, and salt marshes are primarily found in higher latitude areas. So we have a lot of seagrass, salt marshes or tidal marshes in the United States. You find them in Europe. And essentially salt marshes and mangroves occupy the same ecological niche space. One is more in the temperate zone and more is in the subtropical, tropical zone. And so we're really interested in improving the mapping of these systems, which has been quite challenging at times. And some of the reasons why we're really interested in mapping them is because obviously we want to better understand where they are, where they're changing, because we know that when these systems are protected or when we are able to restore them, they are able to sequester and store large amounts of carbon. But when they're degraded or destroyed, these systems really emit all that carbon that they've been storing for hundreds or thousands of years back into the atmosphere and become a source of greenhouse gases. It's actually estimated that about 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide are being released annually from degraded coastal ecosystems. That's almost 20% of the emissions from tropical deforestation globally. And so in order to better protect them and manage them and potentially restore them, we need better estimates of their distribution, their carbon stocks, and the related emissions that come from their changes. So where are we when it comes to mapping these ecosystems? On the top left, I'm showing you the areas of mangroves. So a map of global mangrove extent. And you see, as I mentioned earlier, that most of the mangroves are really located in the subtropical zones, so about 20 degrees north and south, and around the equator, of course. You have large areas of mangroves. Tidal marshes occupy the same niche space. Essentially, they have the same role as mangroves, but they are primarily found in the more temperate zone. So further north, largest extent is in the US, and then you have some in Australia, New Zealand, and then also in the southern tip of Latin America and Africa. Now, seagrass meadows you'll find in almost all of the coastal zones worldwide. However, we actually don't know what the global distribution of seagrass is. As you see here, I have two different maps. I have a map of seagrass, like mapped seagrass extent on the bottom left, and then I have a map of modeled seagrass distribution on the right. And you see that there is a discrepancy. In the modeled one, we have seagrass on all of the coasts, essentially worldwide almost. And in the mapped one, we've only been able to map them for a limited amount of area. So we don't actually know how much seagrass there is. We have an estimate that we can make, but we don't actually know. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to know where these systems are, to have an accurate map of the system, because that then allows you to make decisions on how you might want to manage these systems. Now, as it turns out, mangroves at the moment are actually the best mapped of these three ecosystems. We have put a lot of effort into mapping mangrove forests over the past 10 to 15 years, as I'll talk about later. So we have very nice up-to-date maps of mangrove extent and the changes that are happening. But for tidal marshes and seagrass meadows, we're still working on having better distribution maps for these systems. So I'm going to focus more on describing to you what we have done in the realm of mangroves and why they're important and what type of work we can do using NASA satellite data that is coupled with field measurements. So as I mentioned, mangroves are forests that grow in intertidal areas in tropical and subtropical zones. So they essentially are trees that grow in the areas where land meets sea. They're able to grow in salt water, and they provide a wealth of benefits to people, of what we call ecosystem services. But they're also highly threatened because that area where they grow is also very important and interesting for human development, for agriculture, aquaculture, tourism, etc. So it's really important for us to continue monitoring these systems on a local and on a global scale. So when we think about a mangrove, I think many different things come to mind. And the mangrove ecosystem is actually a very, very highly diverse system. So you could have a mangrove forest with really tall trees, like I'm showing on the left here. This is a picture that I took in April in Everglades National Park in Florida in the US. And here you see those iconic mangrove roots. This is a red mangrove that you see on the left. This is a very nice site because there's actually a boardwalk that allows you to walk through. Because when you're walking through a mangroves, it's very, very difficult. There's a lot of mud, there's water, there are roots everywhere. It's a very challenging system to move through. But because of the roots and their ability to grow in water, this actually is the main reason why they're able to provide many of these ecosystem services that they provide. When we talk about mangroves, we're also talking about the soil of the mangrove, not just the actual tree. So the trees store large amounts of carbon, but the soil also stores large amounts of carbon. So here I'm showing another image. This is another site in Everglades National Park where you have much shorter trees. These are more like shrubby mangroves. They may grow to 1 or 2 meters, but they also have very high carbon storage because a lot of that carbon is actually stored in the soil. And they may not have as much above ground vegetated material, so leaves and roots, etc. But there's a lot of root material. There are roots, growing all underneath here. And then, as I mentioned earlier, also they're a really important system for harboring biodiversity. They provide many other ecosystem services. So I wanted to show a picture of one of the saltwater crocodiles that we saw in Florida as we were conducting our field measurements there. So again, not always the most easy system to work in, and one of the reasons why we're so happy to be able to do remote sensing of these systems. So what are some of the ecosystem services that mangroves provide? Globally, about 120 million people live near a mangrove forest. So, you know, the coastal zone worldwide is the area where you have very high populations. Many people live near mangroves, and many people thereby take advantage of the ecosystem services they provide. Some of the main services they provide are coastal protection. You know, just the physical barrier of having mangroves there protects the inland areas from flooding, from storm surges, and from the, you know, effects of strong storm systems. They also produce really dense wood that is a really highly valued source for timber and for fuel, like charcoal. They support large amounts of fisheries. Over 3,000 fish species are found in mangrove ecosystems worldwide. They also support other biodiversity, not just fish, birds. You have monkeys, as I showed you. We have reptiles and crocodiles. In Asia, you might find tigers. You might find tigers in mangroves. So they're really important for fisheries biodiversity, and also tourism, water filtration, and of course, climate regulation by storing high amounts of carbon in their roots and soil, and in their above ground vegetation. And so on the right here, I just also wanted to show some of the what we call charismatic megafauna. So those animals that, you know, attract people, that might make them really entice them to go into a mangrove and be able to see some of these really charismatic animals like manatees and dugongs, dolphins, and sea turtles, which all spend time in a mangrove forest. And then, as I mentioned, I wanted to also provide a nice overview that shows you how these mangroves are really able to protect us from some of the direct effects of climate change. For example, sea level rise or high storm surges. So on the top here, you see the impact of rising seas or of rising water from storm or sea level rise when you have a mangrove. Essentially, the mangrove is able to act like a sponge and really buffer the inland areas, which it's not able to do anymore if you remove that area, if you remove those mangroves. So despite all of these services that they provide, mangroves have really been destroyed at high rates in the past. It's estimated that almost half of the mangroves, or that half or more of mangroves have been destroyed since the 1950s. And here I'm highlighting how we have seen how we've been able to map that loss of mangroves using Landsat data. Here, this is Landsat time series data from 1994 to 2017 in an area in Indonesia. This area is actually a national park that was fully covered by mangroves in 1994, but has since then been exploited for aquaculture. So as you're seeing here, you have aquaculture ponds that are progressively put in. And this aquaculture is what's supporting a lot of the shrimp farming and a lot of the shrimp that we get every day coming, you know, when we're eating in restaurants or going out and having shrimp. A lot of this shrimp actually comes from converted mangrove areas that were converted to aquaculture ponds. You know, one of the things that's really amazing about having access to large amounts of satellite data and being able to use the Landsat archive, which is now, you know, I think this week almost 50 years long, we have 50 years of Landsat, or this month, is that we're now able to actually monitor these changes that are happening on the ground using satellite imagery. This is really important because, you know, as I mentioned, working in a mangrove is really difficult. We, of course, need to be able to monitor with satellite imagery, but we also need the field measurements to calibrate what we're seeing from space and to confirm that what we're seeing in our satellite imagery is actually there on the ground. And I'm really excited to hear about some of that more later. So here I have an image highlighting how difficult it is. This is Pongara National Park in Gabon, where you have some of the tallest trees in the world. And as you see, those mangrove trees are huge, and it is really difficult to get around. So for us who are really interested in estimating how much carbon in these trees, it's very tough to go in the field and get accurate measurements of all the trees at a scale that we need to make our maps. So this is where combining field measurements with data that we get from space is really crucial. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the remote sensing techniques that we use. We've been working really extensively on estimating the three-dimensional structure of mangroves. And to do this, we use radar technology and LiDAR, which I'll talk a little bit more later. But here I wanted to highlight some of the sensors that we work with. In the middle here is the SRTM digital elevation model, the SRTM DEM, which was collected in 2000, which is a elevation data set, but actually also measures not just the elevation of the ground, but the elevation of the ground plus the trees on top. And so in an area of mangrove, for example, where we know that it's very flat, there's not much underlying topography, we can actually use this data to directly estimate the height of a mangrove tree from space. We also use other data sets, such as LiDAR data from the ISAT glass instrument, to really compare our measurements from multiple instruments and make sure that what we're seeing from the satellite data is actually what you see on the ground. So ISAT glass and SRTM are data sets that are from the 2000 to 2010 era. And now we're working on updating these measurements using the follow-on missions to these. There's one digital elevation model, for example, called TandemX, which is another global digital elevation model. And then we also have access to the JEDI data from the Global Ecosystem Dynamics Investigation, which is the first mission to measure vegetation, elevation, and canopy height directly from space, with a focus on vegetation. So before I go into more detail into what we're measuring, and I wanted to provide a little bit of background of how we actually measure 3D structure. And we are really interested in measuring the three-dimensional structure, as many of you know, because this is a direct way for us to compare, to estimate above ground biomass in forests. So a technique that we use is called LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. It's essentially uses light and the time it takes for laser photons to get from an instrument to the target and back to estimate how far away your target is. So you have LiDAR instruments that are ground-based. You know, sometimes you see them on cars. If you've seen videos of self-driving cars, they may have a LiDAR that tells them how far they are from another car that's close to them. They can also be airborne, so installed on an airplane, which gives us really high resolution and a very accurate data set, or they can be spaceborne. And what's so nice about the LiDAR data is that it gives us very, very accurate measurements, sometimes to the millimeter accuracy. And sometimes, oftentimes, if you're using airborne data, for example, more accurate than what you would be able to measure from the field yourself. But you only get a very limited area that is covered by a LiDAR instrument. So if it's airborne, you may get something that looks like an image. So you may have a lot of data, but it only covers a very small area. And similarly, when you put a LiDAR in space, you also with the technology that we have at the moment, we are getting samples all over the planet, rather than getting wall-to-wall estimates. So not an image that we get from LiDAR data. So this is where we like to combine the LiDAR data that we use with data from what we call SAR interferometry, so synthetic aperture radar interferometry. So radar, as opposed to LiDAR, actually uses radio detection and ranging, so it uses sound rather than using light. And we can use a technique that is called interferometric LiDAR, so where we have two instruments that essentially measure the time it takes from the signal to get from the instrument to the ground and back. Very similarly to the LiDAR data, and that gives us an estimate of how far away or how tall, whatever it is that you're looking at is on the ground. So two very similar measurements. The LiDAR is more accurate, but the radar is able to give you estimates at a larger area. So you get wall-to-wall data that is maybe a little bit less accurate than you would get with the LiDAR data that is more sampled, but very accurate. So the best thing that you can do is essentially to combine the two data sets together. You use the LiDAR data to train the estimates of canopy height that you want to achieve with the radar data. And then finally, of course, we also really work with historical Landsat data and time series data. We're, with the LiDAR and the radar, we're able to get the third dimension. So we know how tall things are. But with Landsat, what we're able to do is actually know what we're looking at on the ground. And by combining all of the Landsat data that we have collected over time, we can also see how that has changed. And actually combine all of those data sets together. We can look at carbon stocks, we can look at canopy structure, and also how that may have changed over time. So I wanted to provide you an example here of how we may be combining some of those data sets. And here I'm showing a map that we produced of global mangrove canopy height on a global scale. So this is a map that is based on the combination of Landsat data to map where the mangroves are, and then the SRTM data and the ISAT data to map the canopy height of these sites. And you may see also numbers on here. These are actually the sites where we went and collected field data for training. So as you see, we have 14 sites that are distributed as far as we can along the planet, but there's really a limited amount of work that can be done in the field to cover enough area. So this is why we're so happy to be able to have access to citizen science data when possible, and also to be able to do remote sensing and estimate forest structure on a global scale. And so here you may see also that there is zoom in here on the central area in Pungara National Park here that I showed you earlier, because this is actually an area where we were able to measure the tallest stand of mangrove trees worldwide. Here's a stand of trees that are 65 meters tall. So really tall trees that are found here in the equatorial regions of West Africa, as well as the Pacific coast of Latin America. So as I mentioned though, this map is based on data from SRTM and ISAT, which is now quite old, almost 20 years old. SRTM was collected in 2000 and ISAT between 2006 and 2009. So a lot has changed since then, as I showed in my original image earlier. And so we're really keen on using the new data that has been made available to us. So I wanted to show a video of the JEDI instrument, which is the data set that we are working with now to get even better estimates of canopy height in mangrove forests. So JEDI stands for the Global Ecosystem Dynamics Investigation. It's an instrument that is on the International Space Station, which we're zooming in now. And what you see here is the JEDI instrument. It's about the size of a fridge. And out of the bottom of it, you have 8 lasers that are shooting out at our planet and essentially collecting data. There's a 4.2 kilometer swath, but every footprint that is produced by JEDI is about 25 meters in diameter. And so as the lasers are shooting down at the planet, essentially, as they come into contact with vegetation, you have that light and that laser, those lasers are reflected back towards the instrument. And the way that we collect data with JEDI is essentially what we call a waveform. So you essentially have this shape here that looks kind of like a wave that tells you where there is vegetated material, where there's vegetation. So when you look at a waveform like this, for example, you see, oh, there's a tall tree, there's a lot of reflection happening here. So it means that you have a tall tree with lots of leaves, most of the canopy is up top. And then you may have some data reflected because you have some canopies that are in the understories, and then not much more in the middle, and then you have a ground return. So this allows you to estimate how tall the trees are by essentially subtracting the the height of the highest reflecting surface from the ground return, but it also gives you some understanding of what's in between the top of the tree and the ground. So we can also use JEDI data to actually estimate things like reef area index or plant area vegetation density. So essentially telling you how dense the plant area is within each footprint. This is a very exciting data set that we're working with currently that is collecting data in areas all over the planet from about 52 degrees north and south. So what does it look like when you have a JEDI map? Here's a really nice animation that's been produced with the JEDI data that hopefully will load now, that essentially shows you a visualization of JEDI canopy height data on a global scale. So areas that are really bright are very tall, and areas that are darker are shorter forests. So of course here the globe is turning, we're going over the Amazon area, and you see very dense tall forest area. Similarly with the west coast of the US, where you have some of the tallest trees in the world. And now as we're going over the Pacific Oceans, you see there are lots of tall trees in Hawaii, and again now in Australia and Indonesia as well. Now you may notice here that there are some areas where you have really tall white spikes. These are not actually forests that are measured, they're most likely radio towers or cell towers or buildings. But because JEDI is not really measuring what it sees, is not mapping the land cover it sees on the ground, it's essentially just getting the height estimate of what we're seeing. So in some areas you may have areas of tall structures that are shown as canopy height as well. The other thing you may have noticed is, as I mentioned, this is a sampling mission. So you are not getting wall-to-wall data. You may have some holes in the middle. And in fact, in this video here, I'm going to show you why and how the JEDI instrument is actually collecting data. So essentially, every time the International Space Station is flying over our planet, we're collecting data. This allows us to progressively fill in the number of JEDI shots and the number of JEDI footprints that we have globally, and allows us to have this like gridded pattern. So again, if I go back to the beginning maybe and zoom in, you'll see how it's like progressively being filled in. Here I'm showing you the state of Florida in the US, and then the bottom left here, you see the Everglades National Park again that I showed you previously, where we have JEDI footprints going right through some of the mangrove areas. So progressively, as JEDI is on the International Space Station, the longer it's on there, the more data we're able to collect, and the more data we're able to get in all different forest types. Now back to changes that are happening. As I mentioned, we're interested in measuring canopy height in 3 dimensions, obviously, where we need to know how tall the trees are. This has a lot of implications for carbon storage and also other ecosystem services that are provided by these systems. But as I mentioned, these systems are also really impacted by changes. They have been lost in the past at high rates, and they're continuing to change, not just because of direct human impacts, but also because of other extreme events. So as we have the combination of land use change, deforestation, direct conversion of mangroves to other uses, and stresses to the system, maybe through changes in water availability and changes in areas where mangroves can migrate, we're actually seeing that these mangroves are responding to the changes and are stressed by predicted changes that are coming with climate change. So one really important aspect is that we also need to know what the main drivers are of changes in mangroves. So where are they changing and why? Because as we know, if we know why they are changing, this allows us to really have a better understanding of what some of the potential management decisions are, or areas where you may want to protect these mangroves or do restoration, or just take it into account in general for your management and planning. So using Landsat data, we were able to produce a map of global loss drivers. So we used the data to map where mangroves were lost and then also what they were lost to. And generally speaking, we came up with 5 main drivers of loss or main causes. You have shoreline erosion, which is happening along many coasts. You have conversion to commodities, so aquaculture and agriculture, especially rice and fish and shrimp ponds. And then we've noticed that there are also many extreme weather events like hurricanes and cyclones, typhoons that have been impacting mangroves. There's non-productive conversion. So this is essentially what we're calling if you're going in and you're cutting a mangrove, but it doesn't actually get converted too much. In many areas, mangroves are used for firewood and for timber and for other uses, and you just essentially go and cut them. And the area where the mangrove used to be is not necessarily converted to something else. And then of course we have areas where you may have a combination of factors. So you have, coastal squeeze happening where you have erosion happening from sea level rise, for example, on the coastal side. And then on the landward side, you have changes for commodities or other uses. But there is some good news. We did notice when doing our analysis that there was a decrease in the rate of deforestation of mangroves. There has been a really strong decrease since the year 2000 in the loss rate of mangroves. We also were able to estimate what proportion of the losses was due to humans directly and which one was due to climate-related events. And we found that 62% of global losses from 2000 to 2016 resulted from land use change directly. And most of those losses were really concentrated in 6 countries, which are Indonesia, Myanmar, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And the other areas, there was much less loss happening in mangroves, which of course is encouraging. But these are also the areas where we noticed that some of these climate-driven events are really having a lot of effect on the mangroves. So most of the losses are actually due to extreme weather events and changes in climate. So one example here is in the Florida Everglades here, where I'm showing an image of before and after Hurricane Irma that went through, where you really see the difference between a before image and then after image, where you have a lot of losses happening in these mangrove areas. And unfortunately, many of these losses are actually permanent. They have been there since 2017. And when we went back in the spring, we noticed that a lot of these areas that were hit by Hurricane Irma have actually not been able to withstand a lot of the changes that are happening. And so just to start finishing off my talk, it's been, one of our main interests is essentially combining all of these measurements that we have taken from 3-dimensional structure and changes happening over time and being able to better understand the vulnerability of these systems into the future. And so this is something that we have done. In the bottom right here, I'm showing a map that we produced of mangrove resilience. So areas where you may have high resilience to mangroves, low resilience to mangroves, and intermediate. So everything that's green is areas where you have a lot of change, where mangroves were able to recover, and blue are areas where you had really low recovery of mangroves. All right, and then I'm going to finish up highlighting some examples of us using LiDAR data in the field. So as I mentioned, we've worked with LiDAR from space. You can put it in an airplane, but you can also work with an instrument that's called a terrestrial laser scanner. And this allows us to, essentially collect field measurements at really high resolution in the field. So here's a fly through of that same, what we're calling ghost forest in Florida. We're flying through the forest. We have billions of laser shots from our scans. You can see a little person standing here at the bottom. This allows us to make measurements of canopy height and structure very similar to what you might do in the field, but on much larger scale. And the goal is to compare these data sets from the field with field measurements, with terrestrial laser scanner measurements, and then to scale it up to compare them to what we're getting from space. And I think that I'm more out of time, so I'm going to end on this slide here and happy to take any questions later.
Thank you very much. Let me, I'm unmuting here, turn on my camera. Outstanding presentation. We have so many questions and we don't have time for all the questions, but fortunately, Peter Nelson was able to address some of the questions in the chat box. I realize myself and a few other people here are visual learners, and seeing all the animations, seeing all the GIFs really helps us, it really resonates with us and helps us understand the problem. So one of the main questions I have, and it's actually come up a couple of times, is can we grab those animations from JEDI, that imagery? It really looks great. I'm sure we would love to share it with other teachers and students. So first question is, where can we grab that animation? And if we can grab the animation, and where do we grab it?
Sure. So the JEDI animations are all on the NASA Goddard Science Visualization Studio website. It's svs.nasa.gov, and I will.
We can do that. We can find the link for. Oh, perfect. Peter is on it.
Yes.
Let's see. Another question that we have from Marcus is regarding the mangrove loss. He writes 62% is due to land use change driven by local people or by foreign companies. Because I would expect local people to understand that deforestation finally threatens themselves.
That's a really good question. I mean, I think it's a really hard thing to detect with remote sensing data alone, but I would say that most of the losses are driven by these large scale projects. So aquaculture, for example, is one of the main drivers of mangrove loss in Indonesia. Indonesia and Southeast Asia in general have the largest mangrove areas. I think about a quarter of all mangroves are in just the country of Indonesia. And then Indonesia also has, large amounts of, also has the largest deforestation rate and a large conversion to these other uses and commodities. And I think primarily, aquaculture, so fish ponds and rice are the main commodities. And a lot of this is actually for export. So I'm assuming that there are many different companies and uses. I don't exactly know if it's primarily driven by large corporations or individuals, but I think, a lot of those conversions happened in the past. A lot of this has happened at a time where mangroves were not necessarily appreciated as an important ecosystem. And so now with the emergence of understanding of people for the importance of mangroves, we're really seeing a lot of changes that are happening on the ground. It's very encouraging actually to see this. And as a scientist, it's really nice to say, oh, okay, what we're doing, all this information that we're producing and the science we're producing is actually able to inform some of the decisions that are being made.
Thank you. We have another question from Yashra. He asks, what are the most important factors to consider when identifying changes in sensitivity and sensitive ecosystems and biodiversity as a result of abrupt climate change?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I think what we have found is that it's very difficult to assign a specific event that's happening to climate change. But what we're seeing is there are trends, right? So the reason why why I really appreciate and like working with Landsat data, for example, is that allows us to look at trends over time, not just look at one time or even at 2 times. You might see, oh, a mangrove forest before and then a mangrove forest after the storm and assume, oh, the storm is killing all the mangroves. But what we found is that actually, if you're looking at the trends over time, yes, it might look like that mangrove is, has died immediately after the storm, but over time, you're then seeing regreening in a lot of areas. You're seeing different responses. And by being able to see the different types of responses, so some areas might, have lost all their leaves, but will regreen really quickly within a month or two. And those areas you will assume are probably quite resilient to the changes that you're seeing. But then other areas may not be regreening. They're just staying quote unquote brown in the image, or you're not seeing, even over 1 year, 2 year, you're not seeing any recovery. So that's a way to really be able to say, okay, this is an area that is, really highly stressed and is not able to withstand some of these changes that we're seeing.
And a follow-up question to that, the last question. We have a lot of them actually, so perhaps if you have time, you can look through the chat box. The follow-up is, which aspects of a species behavior should we focus on when studying the biodiversity?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and not really one that I think I have the answer to. I think there are many aspects that you can study. Yeah, I think one thing that's, in the case of mangroves and blue carbon systems in general, there's always a direct link to fisheries, right? There are many studies that have found that mangrove cover or coastal wetland extent is directly related to fisheries catches, fisheries extent. So, I think there's a lot of interest and research that's going on in the kind of relating fish stocks and fish biodiversity to vegetation structure. Especially if you're looking on a remote sensing side, it's a nice way to use what we can see, right? Which is essentially, how much forest is there, and try to relate it to what we can't really see from space, which is how many fish are there, or what are the different species that we're seeing within these ecosystems.
Thank you. Yeah, both Brian and I were chatting. We're like, we love the whole ghost forest name. That was such a cool animation. I just wanted to end with that because it was really, I've never seen anything like that, and I've been working at NASA for quite some time. Really cool visualizations. Thank you for sharing your presentation. And as I mentioned, there are a lot more questions in the chat box. So I apologize if we couldn't get to them all. We're a bit short on time. But thank you once again. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Brian.
All right, thank you, Peter, and thank you so much, Dr. Fatoyinbo, for the amazing presentation. And I always, as Peter said, I've been at NASA a long time now, and there's always something new that I learned every day, And the one about that the mangroves pull in 3 to 5 times more the carbon dioxide than just, the tropical rainforest. That's, pretty mind blowing, and that's, shows how important mangroves are and why we need to research them, all the time. So thank you so much for the presentation. And okay, so I'm going to hop back into my presentation quickly and share my screen. So to introduce the next presentation here, here we go. So next presentation is going to be with Genevieve Santawangolo and Monique Poole, and they are, Genevieve is a field researcher with the Green Heritage Fund Suriname in Paramaribo, Suriname, South America, and Monique Poole is the director of the Green Heritage Fund Suriname. And they're going to be talking about developing a mangrove protocol and working with local communities in the districts of Corny and Niggery, Suriname, as well as an expansion to a 3rd coastal district in Suriname. So let me go ahead and I apologize if we run over a little bit, but as you know, with our campaigns, this is kind of standard fare with our campaign webinars, because we always have so much amazing information and great presenters. We don't want to cut anyone short, so stay on as long as you can. And then following this presentation, Peter Nelson will come on and talk a little bit about some of the online tools. And I know he's been putting those things in the chat as well. Some of the things about what you can use in your classroom, how you can get some of the visualizations and imagery. So thank you, Peter, for that. But let me turn it over to Genevieve and Monique right now, and I will stop sharing. And welcome.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Monique. I'm going to first start with the introduction. I'll share my screen, and then I will hand over to Genevieve. So my name is Monique Poole, and I've been the country coordinator for GLOBE Suriname since 2010. And I love GLOBE, and we've been really trying to get it introduced in Suriname in the school system. But one of the things that makes it a little bit difficult is that a lot of the protocols are not really related to our environment. And so a few years ago, we said, you know, the mangroves, we work in the coastal zone. The mangroves are so important for us. And I came in contact with Genevieve, and she wanted to join our organization. And we decided that maybe it was time for GLOBE to have a tropical protocol in the mangrove protocol, because it's for all the countries that are in this area. I mean, Lola already showed it, where all these mangroves are located. And so we started working. So that's the reason why we have this mangrove protocol, also to show, and that was, I think, a question also in the chat, how can we convince people how what the importance is of the mangroves, and so the ecosystem services, the fact that they support important fisheries. We have very good fisheries in Suriname, and that is due to the fact, or as a result of the fact, that we have such amazing mangroves still along our coast. So with that introduction, I'm going to hand over to Genevieve. We call her Pebbles. She is not on camera because she has this amazing computer that does not have a camera, but it's a very good computer otherwise. And so I hand over to Pebbles then.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Pebbles, and I will be presenting our community-based mangrove monitoring project. And this project is actually based off of this mangrove protocol that we made. And the goal of this protocol is actually to do a rapid mangrove assessment of the state of a mangrove area. A disclaimer though, with this protocol, you cannot tell if an area is healthy or not. But by using this protocol, the outcome, you can compare it to other areas, to outcomes of other areas, and you can indicate if one area is healthier than the other area. Because we look at certain observations, and to be able to tell if an area is healthy or not, you have to look a little bit deeper. So we don't have that much parameters within this protocol, so that's why we cannot you cannot say if an area is healthy or not. Rather, you can compare it to other areas. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Is this okay?
Yeah. Okay, as I said before, we look at observations. So we observe important bioindicators within a mangrove area. And bioindicators, the volgende slide, Monique.
Yeah, it's something going weird. 1 second.
Oh, it's stuck.
Yeah, I think so. This one.
Yes, this one. Yeah. So we look at the bioindicators within a mangrove area. And a bioindicator can be a living organism that gives us an idea of the health of an ecosystem, because they're usually very sensitive to pollution or change, and they can therefore define an area or indicate status and even climate change. So, these organisms that we observe can serve as an integrated measure of environmental health and well-being, because they are inseparably related to their physical environment. And because we needed to keep the mangrove protocol very simple, because we're working with communities and students, we don't use a lot of instruments to be able to use this protocol. So we study the presence and behavior of different organisms. Next slide, please. Hello.
Are you seeing it? Okay.
So as I stated before, we look at bioindicators, and the bioindicators that we observe are the vegetation. We look at the trees and the roots. Furthermore, we look at the crabs, the crab activity, looking at the crab burrows, and also the bird activity. So for the vegetation survey, we look at, as I said before, the trees. So we identify every tree within a plot, a 10 by 10 plot. We identify them on a species level, and that can either be the black, white, or red mangroves, because those are the mangroves that grow in Suriname. And furthermore, we categorize every single tree within the plot. We categorize them by height. So every tree below 1 meter is considered a seedling. Trees from 1 to 3 meters is considered a sapling, and trees above 3 meters is considered a mature tree. So furthermore, we also look at the status of every tree in a plot. We give it a 0 if it's a healthy tree with all its roots and its stem and twigs and branches and leaves intact. But if we see that leaves or twigs, etc., are missing, we consider it a dying tree, and we also categorize that tree from 1 to 3. 1 is considered a tree that is with absence of their leaves, and 2 is considered a tree with absence of their leaves and twigs. And status number 3 is considered a tree that only has a stem. We also look at the roots, the root density per square meter, because the roots are correlated with the amount of trees within that area. Because we're doing this this protocol usually along the coast, there are a lot of black mangrove trees there. So we only look at the pinatophores, and these trees they're pencil-like. So they stick up off the ground just like pencils. We only look at those trees and not the others, because the other species are usually not around within those areas where we study these trees. Next slide, please. Furthermore, we look at the crab. We look at the crab burrows exactly, not the crabs itself. It's quite difficult to be able to establish which one is an active burrow or not, because everywhere is, is a bit wet. But we do the crab survey within the mangrove and within the mangrove plot, and also on the mud flat right in front of the mangrove area, to be able to compare where there are more crabs. So the reason why we chose crabs is because crabs are a key species in mangrove ecosystems and are one of the most important species in a mangrove habitat. So they actually play a very important role in carbon cycling and soil chemistry by burrowing in sediments and therefore breaking down the leaves on the soil. And these animals have also been used as indicator species in the past as well. As for the bird survey, during the bird survey, we look at the amount of birds that are on the mudflats and within the mangrove plot itself. There are usually a lot more birds on the mudflat because they're foraging for food there compared to the mangrove and compared to the mangrove vegetation itself. But it's quite difficult to be able to identify the birds because the locals and myself, we usually know only the herons and the egrets, but there are lesser known species, bird species that we do not know of. But luckily during field work, we were in contact with a bird specialist, Sin Dilrosen, and together we made up a list of all the birds that would potentially or could potentially be found within a mangrove area. So not only the egrets and the herons. It's still a bit difficult to be able to identify them, but by doing it a few times, you'll get the hang of it. So the reason why we actually put the bird survey within this protocol is because research has shown that birds in general are also linked to the overall ecology integrity of their ecosystem. And this is a fact because birds are very sensitive to habitat fragmentation, land composition, and also changes in habitat structure. So therefore, we also integrated the bird survey within this mangrove protocol. Next slide, please. So the way we train the people from the communities is by organizing 2-day workshops. And during this workshop, we present the mangrove protocol, and we also test it in the field. But one of the activities that we also do is this simple but very effective mangrove web game. And that is actually to highlight the importance of mangroves, not only as coastal protection. So this actually is a very productive game that maybe other people could do as well. So that was it for my mangrove protocol presentation. I must say that within this protocol, we also use water quality measurements. These are the measurements that we take. We also test the water quality alongside the mangrove areas that we study, so we can see the changes with time as well. And as for the biosphere protocols, we use tree height, we use the GBS protocol, but we also would like the globe to adapt the vegetation, the crab, and the bird survey as well. You see there in red is the tree circumference. We do not do that momentarily, but maybe in the future we would like to add that to the protocol as well. But for now, it's quite a challenge to go in the field again, because we did this back in 2019. That was before COVID. And it was quite a challenge to bring the people that we have recruited back to the field. But that's that for our mangrove protocol. And if you guys have any questions, I'm glad to answer them.
Hello. Yes, we actually do have some questions for you. And once again, thank you for your presentation. We apologize for the lag. This seems to happen often with technology, but as Brian and I say, we just roll with it, and it always seems to work out. So apologize for the lag with the presentation. One question we have from Marcus is, he asks, give me one moment, let me look for it. Yes, does the Globe Mangrove Protocol already exist, or do you plan on implementing it?
So actually in the past years, we have written it and we've tested it. So we would like to implement it and actually submit it to Globe, so it could be adopted by Globe as well, so other people from other countries can also use this. But for now, we have tested it and it seems to be working. So we do, it's quite challenging to be able to do the statistical analysis, because it doesn't look like a lot, but when you do it, it's quite a lot. So we have a few data sets to process yet, but yeah, we would like to adopt, we would like Globe to adopt the Globe protocol as well.
And are you looking for other areas to pilot the protocol to help with the amount of data that you have?
So for now, we have tested it in 2 two communities, Inikere and Koroni. And we are branching out to another district, Saramaka. So that is our next step for now.
Yeah, and there is interest from the other countries in the LAC region, because we've been promoting this protocol for several years now within our regional presentations, and there are at least 8 countries that are interested in starting to implement it.
I can see this being used in areas like New Orleans, where they are hit hard with hurricanes every year, and they have forests there as well. We have another question from Anna from Argentina, and she asks, it would be interesting to measure salinity. Have you considered it?
Yes, so I actually said it at the end of the presentation. Aside from the vegetation, the crab and the bird survey, we also do water quality measurements within the areas, and salinity is one of the parameters that we also measure. Yes.
Thank you. So I think that was going to be it for the questions, because we are short on time. But once again, thank you very much for your presentation. There was a question about whether people would be able to see your presentation, and we do have this recorded, so people can go back and review your slides when they need to, because we do archive that on our website. So once again, thank you very much for your presentation. Apologies for the lag there in our internet, but once again, great presentation. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And in the time we have, let me pass it over to Peter Nelson. Take it away, Peter.
Wow. A lot of information, really exciting interactions between water and trees today. I think this is a really fascinating area because you know, when we think about land cover and when we think about a lot of the ways that satellite imagery maps have been created, we tend to put it into this one category. It's either trees or it's water. And it's just really fascinating to start thinking about that complexity between things that are happening up in a tree canopy above that a satellite might see, as well as what's actually happening on that ground. And to me, you know, one of the big things that I take away is how important these ground observations are. And that is, I think, one of the strengths that the GLOBE program has. And so I do hope that that mangrove bundle is adopted by a lot more people to at least go out and investigate and do that rapid assessment. I think that's really useful and helpful, especially since they're hard to work in. That's one of the big things I've heard from a lot of mangrove researchers is just how challenging it is to walk around in some of those places. And so I think, you know, this is a particular role that we can play as a GLOBE community. And I want to highlight that I think there's opportunities here for all of us to, even if we're not living in an area that has mangroves, for us to play a role in understanding where they're located, maybe the changes that are happening, and so I want to demonstrate some of the ways that you might start bringing this into your classroom. I wanted to highlight. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of satellite imagery and a lot of data that goes into trying to understand these edges, these land cover edges. And so, you know, with that, you know, we do have this incredible GLOBE database. And to me, one of the things that I take away from this is how important these ground photos really can be to those of us who don't live near mangroves, to really understand the structure that it goes into making them. And so one of the things that I hope to see happen, you know, as we move forward is getting some more examples of some mangroves from around the globe into our database. And I think, you know, this is where those ground photos using Globe Observer, the land cover tool in particular, is probably your rapid assessment tool. Right? It's going to be hard to kind of actually do the walking and do some of those sort of things from some of the other protocols. So I think, you know, to me, that's just one of those things that as I look at those landscapes, I say, wow, it takes a lot of effort to actually extract information or be able to describe some of those locations. So I hope that I can show some of my students some of these locations. So I just want to encourage anybody who's here, who's actually living in some of these ecosystems, to share what they look like back to us. Because for me, that will actually really help me to understand this suite of tools that are available to us. And I want to highlight that if you have questions about where and what is driving mangrove loss, this particular data that came out from one of the papers that was shown earlier from Goldberg et al., who was an intern there at NASA, you can actually come in and look at some of these changes, where they're occurring, and start to ask questions of, is there something similar like that happening in my community? Even if they're not mangrove specifically, maybe there are some other riparian vegetation where you are actually seeing some of the different driving forces like erosion that's happening in your community. And try to draw some comparison between some of these locations that are available. When you zoom out, you can start to actually get and understand this global perspective. So I want to just highlight how important those ground photos can be to helping us to actually understand what does erosion look like in terms of tree or mangrove loss. And again, one of the things that I thought was really fascinating that came out in a paper was how important hurricanes are in relation to where we find the tallest mangroves and some of the tallest trees on the coastal areas. In fact, it's related to where the hurricane paths actually originate from and where they travel through. And so there is this really fascinating climate connection between mangrove height and hurricane storms in particular. So, these connections between climate and tree height and that complexity of edges is one of these things that it takes quite a bit of data and a lot of resources to really help us to understand and then to track them over time. And so, for me, I always go back to this global forest height map that was created back in 2019. And this is one of these data sets that we want to encourage you to explore for your location. And we do know that mangrove areas in particular are locations where a map like this does not do as good. And so it might actually underestimate the height of those trees because of the techniques that they used. You'll notice that they used the sensor that we talked about today, the JEDI sensor, which is part of the reason why you see the data cut off in the way that it does. So again, a lot of our conversations about sensors and what we're measuring and how we're measuring it comes into some of these maps that are available to you. So I really want to encourage you to zoom into some of your coastal locations and to look at those tree heights and see and compare to your own measurements. What is there? And is it reasonable? And I thought one of the interesting things about the mangrove bundle and protocol is this idea of what do you consider a tree? How tall does that tree or growing thing need to be, that vegetation need to be considered a tree? And so, pay attention to that factor, because there, we talked about measuring everything that was taller than 1 meter. You might consider 3 meters in some maps, or in the globe protocols, something's not a tree until it reaches 5 meters in height. Okay, so just kind of think about this definition of tree height in relation to some of these maps, because it's a really important characteristic, and might be why some of those mangroves are left off of some of these maps, is because they're just not reaching that height threshold that these people are actually mapping. finally, I want to, again, kind of take us to this map here, this global land cover map that allows you to actually look at changes over time and be able to compare some of these locations and to other locations. And again, you know, part of the reason why we're highlighting this is because this was one of the first land cover maps at 100-meter scale, which is the same size as our globe land cover study sites. And so there is a relationship here. But again, one of those things that comes out that was really highlighted are these edges of how much tree needs to be there versus how much water needs to be there for it to actually be registered as a particular thing on this map. And so I know if we zoom in on some of these locations along the coastal areas of this area in South America, we can actually start to see areas that we might identify as potentially mangroves, right? Between this forested area and the permanent water bodies. This area between those two land cover types might be where we actually find those mangroves. But because of the scale of this map, it's not being labeled in a particular way, right? Or we might look for the mangroves in this herbaceous wetland vegetations. But to me, this is one of those things that these maps always bring up. And I really appreciated seeing a lot of these maps that scientists are making today, because those are the beginning of questions. Is that thing that they say actually in that location? Are there really trees there? Is there really water in this location? And if there is water or trees, that then becomes another question of, well, what is the quality of those trees? And that's where the GLOBE protocols really come in. So I want to encourage everybody who's here to definitely explore those particular tools and to do some comparisons between the year 2015, the year 2019, and today, right? Is the area the same as it was just 2 years ago or 3 years ago? Those are really interesting driving questions for you and your students. And I want to highlight how important this work really is. And this goes back to something that we'll be celebrating next time that we get together. And that it really is 50 years ago, July 23rd, 1972, NASA helped to put the first civilian Earth observation satellite in space, and that was Landsat. And as you heard all throughout today and what I've been showing you, Landsat gives us this ability to time travel, to understand how things are changing because of our own decisions, but also because of the natural processes that are happening. What will the next 50 years hold? And what will the world look like in another 50 years? That's this really wonderful question that we get to ponder and think about. Generational science that the GLOBE program is developing and creating, so that 2 generations from now, those students will also be able to understand these coastlines and these particular trees that we've been measuring today. Are they still going to be there? And what is the quality of them going to be for 2 generations from now? Those groups of students. So I want to encourage you all to join me. We're going to have another GLOBE data challenge, because what does GLOBE like to do? Collect lots of data so that students and teachers have something, and communities have the information available to them so that they can focus on doing the analysis and making decisions from this data. So we have this upcoming data challenge around land cover. And this is a great way to do some of this rapid assessment of these mangroves around you, where you might be going on vacation, where you might be living, or where you're not living, where you are living, and show us those locations. Again, we need to sort of know what is where mangroves are growing and where they are not growing, to be able to come up with a good model and to be able to predict how certain activities are going to impact them. And so from July 26th to August 26th, we have this Globe Observer Citizen Science Challenge, really looking at how your community is changing or where you're traveling this summer. How is it changing? We've given you a lot of tools to look at it from that satellite perspective, from that space perspective that NASA's so good at. And the US Geological Survey, who also helps to manage the Landsat program. And so take part in this. Help us to gather some more data so that your students and other students around the world will have the opportunity to dig into some really interesting questions and be able to have the data that they need to do some good globe investigations. And finally, I've been dropping into the chat some wonderful training that NASA has put together to help you understand the science and the workflows that have been highlighted here today. Here is one that I'm a big fan of, because it allows us to look at that time series of satellite observations and look at that location over time. Again, we most likely won't have a globe measurement throughout that whole time series. And so this ability to take our measurements today, but put it into this context of the satellite imagery is something that this training in particular really helps with. And so I encourage your students to take it. I encourage you to take it and really help us to celebrate and understand what 50 years of satellite observations have revealed about the trees around the globe.
Hey, Peter, two quick questions. I know we're behind time, but these are some great questions. I'm hoping perhaps you can answer them. First, I want to get to Cindy because she has asked some great questions earlier in the other presentations and I wasn't able to address them. She asked, what are factors that are causing mangrove forests to establish themselves further north along the Atlantic and Gulf Coast?
Yeah, so I think, there's, again, many reasons. And so getting into the specifics in that watershed, in that particular region, might be some particular reason for restoration programs, especially in the United States. The other thing that goes along with this is trees are migrating north as those areas become more hospitable to that particular tree. The climate is changing as we go further north. And so it makes a lot of sense that a lot of the trees that we've been monitoring are actually moving further north. And us biologists and even remote sensing people, one of the things we really like to do is find where is the furthest example of this tree. So where are the furthest north examples of mangroves? Where, as a globe community, who has the furthest north mangroves? I think that's a really interesting question that could be thrown out there to the globe community. One that I always have is where is, again, kind of the flip side, where is the furthest south that we can find a tree? What latitude is that located at? And what is the environment of that location? And as we go further north or south to the poles, we get some really interesting vegetation, and we ending up without trees in those locations. So that to me is a really interesting question that just sort of requires a little bit more investigation, gathering a lot more locations of where we're finding mangroves, right? And so that requires a mapping activity as much as anything to be able to answer a question like that. So hopefully some of those maps that I've been able to share allow you to start looking at where those furthest north mangroves might be occurring. And then that requires more investigation about why it might be happening. And that to me is where these maps really get the investigations going.
Great. One last question. We have a comment from Joanna from Alaska. She says, when I first moved to Shagalok, Alaska, I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, in the late 70s, we were mainly tundra. She said, doing the muck for about 10 years now, she realized that now they have changed to a boreal forest. So that's very interesting. She has one question. I just want to address it very quickly before we run out of time. And she asks, has anyone ever researched the fossilized mangrove forests that are sometimes found in the waters off coast here and there? I'm not sure where, but I know they've been found. She's like, just curious.
So I will, again, this is a person who's got lots of expertise in this area. In fact, in Oregon, near where I'm located, are the John Day fossil beds, and this is a location where there are a lot of fossilized old mangrove forests, as well as pine forests and other forests like that have been fossilized into the rock. And so it is really fascinating when you start looking around and looking at old geology of the earth, where you can actually find mangrove forests in past climates. And again, that kind of brings up this really interesting questions that, what will the future climates hold? Where will those mangrove forests migrate to? And how does what we're talking about today actually relate to some of these concepts of climate change? And to me, the John Day fossil beds are a great location where you can dig into a little bit more of how past climates have changed, and also the old tree species that you can find examples of from Arizona to the deserts of Eastern Oregon, all the way up to Alaska. Really fascinating stuff when you start digging into deep time.
You have a plethora of knowledge. I mean, before there was Google, there was Peter Nelson. I just want to say, great to have you back, Peter. Brian, I missed you. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of the team. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Brian. And once again, just say thanks a lot.
Yep. Thank you, Peter. And thank you so much to Monique, Genevieve, and Lola for presenting today. We did go 2 hours on the webinar, but thank you all so much for staying, because we especially want to thank all the 4 presenters for really highlighting the importance of mangroves